start the intro music. We should probably do a clapper just because it makes it easier on my life.
Okay.
Everybody set? We'll go 1, 2, 3, and then clap. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Cool. Hello, everybody out there in YouTube world. We are getting ready to record. Well, we are recording. We're getting ready to go officially on the show. This will be a debate episode, so there will be blood. All the blood will be virtual and only exist in digital form, thankfully.
Jared, I have a confession. When we did the clap, my hardware mute switch was on. You did not hear me clap.
Heck of a confession. I forgive you, I guess. I'll figure it out. I'll just line up your confession with my
You can clap now if that helps.
Nope. Oh, if you clap right now? No, because I'm not going to sync it to anything. No, I'll figure it out. The worst thing we can do is a second clap because then I get totally confused on which one is which and all that. So let's just let it go. It's pretty easy anyways. It just makes it slightly easier. All right. And everybody can hear that?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Too loud?
It gets clipped pretty quick.
Nick, if you clap now, then you'll just offset yourself ahead of everyone so that you can make the counterpoint. You can respond to what they say and it'll sound
amazing.
It'll sound like you said it before they even said it.
That would be a way to win, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Just be like, I know what you're going to say. And that's why, and this is why it's wrong.
Yeah.
And then they go ahead and then they say that. And then you just auto win.
I already listened to your argument and it's trash. So mine's better. All right, let me get a timer open more. Also, I gotta keep my timer for the segments too. Tricky. I'll just do that by.
So Divya, do you wanna go first and then like leave me whatever remaining time you don't use, and I'll just fill it in.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably I don't imagine I'm gonna speak for the entire time, and I think same for Amal if she. I mean, I don't know. Nick,
Well, you still there?
At some point.
Yeah, I'm still there. I'm
okay.
Like responding back to Slack messages. I'm gonna just like
good.
disable my screen for work. I'm sorry. I'm very distracted today.
No, it's
Do
just
not disturb.
I just want to make sure you're there because when you're not talking, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I know.
Cool.
I am here.
Everybody set?
Divya, feel free to tell
Would it be better if I breathe really hard? Just kidding. I'm sorry for us.
Like Darth Vader.
No,
yeah, just be like
just so we know your presence.
Napoleon Dynamite, you know.
That might intimidate the other team. I don't know. Just breathe during Divya's argumentation. Yeah.
I definitely need audience, interaction or feedback. So it's like, this argument.
It's funny because honestly, I need so many more dumb moments in my life. I feel like we've tried too hard to sound smart, and you know what? It's okay to just be stupid sometimes.
Right. It was funny because we have a show upcoming for the changelog where Adam was making a point, and one of our guests is like a whole bunch of people on the same show. He was saying a point that she disagreed with, and she just sat there, and then when he was done, she goes, "Well, you can't see me, but I'm over here rolling my eyes." I was like, well played. Go ahead and go with the audible eye roll.
For us, what were you gonna say?
Oh, I was just gonna say if you want to use more than a minute, that would be fine.
Oh, I
feel like my okay.
We'll do it live.
We'll do it live. This is when there's not strong arguments on one side. You're like, if you want more time, go ahead and use it. All right, let's start the show, shall we? Hello, friends. It's time once again for a JS party. I'm Jared. I'm here to host a debate. This is our yep, nope format wherein we come up with a premise, we team up, and we debate either side of that premise, whether or not we actually believe in the side that we're assigned. We'll find out later. I am joined by 4 friends. Let's just get through it real quick. Let's just get through it real quick. We got Nick, Amel, Divya, and Faraz with us. What's up, everybody?
Hoi hoi.
Hey,
Going on?
everybody.
Hello.
And our teams will be Divya and Faraz versus Amel and Nick. Are you all ready? Do you want to do any
Let's
smack
do
talk to get
it.
started, or like announce how you're about to dominate or anything like that?
Like in WWE,
Yeah.
take you down. I don't know what they say. Well, I used to watch it actually a lot, strangely.
Or we could just do a stare down like at a weigh-in for MMA or something. You just stare at each other. But that doesn't make Nick's staring us down. Doesn't make for very good podcasting. So I'll move on. The premise for today's debate is one that is debated online and in the industry sometimes, which is that web apps are fundamentally different than websites. So we'll have one team representing the yup, which is agreeing that web apps are fundamentally different than websites. And that will be Team Amel. And then we'll have Team Divya representing the nope side of the debate, which argues that web apps are not fundamentally different than websites. So 2 minutes on the board. We do this semi-formal. So we don't get totally dressed up. We get dressed up a little bit. And we set some timers. So there'll be a 2-minute timer for you to make your case. If you run out of time, you'll hear this sound. And your time will be up. If you run short, that's totally cool as well. Just go ahead and concede the rest of your time, and we'll go back and forth. So we have the yeps first, Team ML, 2 minutes on the board. And who's going first for Team ML? Is it Amel or Nick?
I say gentlemen first. So
Okay. Reverse
Oh.
chivalry. Appreciate
Wow.
reverse. Yeah, I know.
it. All right, Nick, you are on the board for 2 minutes.
I was
you
going
can
to make a really bad joke about how, men actually run the world anyway. So, oh well. Just kidding. No,
Amal dropping truth bombs. Just
I like how Amel introduces her jokes by saying she was going to make the joke and then she makes it
know.
anyways. Kind of in a reverse, kind of a sneaky joke there. All right. Nick, you're running the
joke
world.
notch.
I'm running the clock. 2 minutes on the board. Here you go, Nick.
All right. Well, web apps are fundamentally different than websites. Now, my opponents here are probably going to say that to an end user, it probably is no different because you're just hitting them from a browser, you're going to a URL, and you're using whatever is there. And I'm going to say that I disagree with that because they are fundamentally different. And when you look at it from the perspective of actually building them, they're really fundamentally different, or they can be really fundamentally different. But first, I'll start by kind of trying to define what each one is. And I'll just say quickly that a website is informational. It's defined by its content, and it can be minimal on scripting, although that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. But the content is typically static. And then a web app is defined by its interaction with the user. So it's more, what can the user do with this? And it definitely expects interaction, which means it probably has scripting on the heavier side. So a lot of JavaScript, a lot of other scripting languages in there, potentially doing things. So I think that they are fundamentally different just in that definition, because a web app is something that you're going to interact with, and a website is going to be something that you're just going to look at and consume the data. And some examples of that is, I think that GitHub is a really good website to look at my code and to see what's going on there and to do a little bit of minimal interaction. I can, press a button to do a pull request as long as everything is green, and I can't really, change things like resolve conflicts or anything, because it's just a website that's giving me a lot of information and letting me interact with it in a minimal way. But if I want to actually go in and change my code, I'm going to load the Codespace's web app and use that to change my code, or Vim if I want to actually be productive. Another example would be like, I want to look at pretty web design. Oh, all right.
Sorry, Nick, you wasted all your time doing Vim drops. Which is time well spent, I will say.
Yep.
Okay, so Team
Great
Divya,
job,
you now
teammate,
have
though.
2 minutes to respond. You can also just ignore everything Nick said and just state your case. However you want to do it. Who's going to go first for Team Divya?
I can go.
All right, Divya, you got 2 minutes on the board. It's all yours. Go ahead.
All right. So websites and web applications are not fundamentally different, but I will make the argument that at one point in time, the reason why there seems to be this artificial difference is because in the beginning, websites, or the way we see websites and web properties, were static in the sense that you had to SSH into your server, you had to FTP your content, everything was static, mostly HTML. But then in the early 2000s, we saw full stack frameworks come into the fore, mainly LAMP stack and so on. And these were web applications in the sense that they were not static. They were not just plain HTML files. They were actual PHP running on a server. You needed Apache and so on. But as time moved on and as web development developed, we saw this shift where now we have software as a service, where there's hosted platforms that allow you to do things that were not possible before. And what I mean by that is that the traditional sense of the website is and the traditional sense of web app no longer exists. Like the difference between them is fairly, well, non-existent in this point, because now whatever you can do with regards to this static versus dynamic is not really a dichotomy that you can talk about. So for example, Nick brought up this idea that you can't there's minimal user interaction on a static site. Well, there actually is a lot of user interaction that you can include, because you have things like hosted databases that you can make calls to. Sites can start static, and then you can build up APIs using, there's like so many microservices. There's a whole API economy that allows you to do things. So you could have something super dynamic, like a Shopify site that is completely full end to end. And therefore, websites and web applications are not very different. Faraz, did you want to add?
10 seconds.
I mean, okay, 10 seconds, really? All right, I'll just give back the time. I'll take the 10 seconds in the second part. Is that legal?
Yeah, we'll get you an extra 10 on the next time.
All right.
All right. That was Divya's turn. And of course, as your moderator, I'm here to provide real-time fact checking. Nick asserted that you cannot perform merge conflicts or you cannot fix merge conflicts on github.com. Fact check, false. You can actually do that. Okay.
Limited. You can do limited merge conflict fixes now. Can't you? Like some things they still make you check out. Do they?
You can do.
Really?
Well, I don't know how fancy they're gonna get.
Yeah, I think it's limited. But
Okay.
anyways.
Wow.
Nick did not say it. So you're fact checking my fact check, or what's going on here?
I've never seen that UI.
Oh yeah, there's definitely a merge conflict resolution
there is.
UI, and it is.
Yep,
Yeah.
there is.
I don't know how limited it is, because apparently my merge conflicts are all
They're all
relatively
basic.
simple, because I'm so basic.
When did GitHub become a web app?
All right, let's get back onto the board. We're going now back to Team Amel and to Amel herself, the chivalrous one. Amel, you get 1 minute to respond, because that's less time than the other people got. I don't know.
Okay.
It doesn't explain why, but go ahead. You got 1 minute.
Sure. So I'd like to say that I'm going to take a different approach with my 1 minute, which is just like fundamentally assert that the web has evolved and that websites and web apps are terms used to, I think, distinguish level of complexity and expected interaction for users. And so, if I'm interacting on a website, I'm really expecting a more static experience, something that's typically a read. And when I'm interacting with web apps, I'm really, like there's a context shift there. There's a lot of read-write behavior. And I think it's really important for us as web developers to push the term of web app, because users have native apps on their phone, and we have progressive web apps that essentially are allowing web apps to compete with native apps in their domain. And so, users essentially can't distinguish sometimes between, is this button like launching a browser that's full screen, or is this launching a native app? And I think it's, yes, that's it.
Okay.
I'll continue the rest of my arguments later.
Okay. Good job, Amel. We go now to Faraz. 1 minute and 10 seconds to respond.
Yeah, so we're talking about whether websites and web apps are different from each other. And I'll concede right away that obviously there are different types of websites. There's static blogs on one end, static sites that are basic HTML. And then on the other end, there's things like full graphic editors like Figma, and there's 3D multiplayer games. So there's obviously a huge range of different types of websites. So, the other side is arguing that there are differences in the types of websites that you can build, and that obviously makes sense. So our side will totally concede that. But at the end of the day, these are all just websites. The web is extremely capable and amazing. It can do all kinds of types of experiences. But fundamentally, we're dealing with the same web technology. A user visits a URL, the server sends some HTML, the browser displays it, it runs some scripts, and all this stuff is running inside of the same thing. It's running inside of a web browser. All the same browser features work: the back button, the forward button, the refresh button, the bookmarks, the history, your browser extensions. You can copy and paste URLs and share websites to other people. So, if we were debating whether native apps and web apps are different, I would agree. But come on, we're talking about websites here. All these different types of things are websites. Just ask the W3C or WhatWG or TC39. They're all working on one set of standards for websites. They're not making a separate set of standards for other websites. So by this appeal to authority, you should see that we're talking about the same thing here. Not to mention, the other side has already been fact-checked and proven wrong. So take that into account.
All right, real-time fact check here. Faraz stated that the back button always works. Fact check false.
Oh my God. No, it usually works unless it's been tampered with. I think that's a fair point.
I was going to argue that that's a key feature of a web
Of a
app,
web
is
app.
you don't have all of that built-in functionality working.
With that fact, we will take a break and we'll begin round 2 right after this.
All right.
All right, break. I had to fact check you because you just stated that one of your arguments is the other team got fact checked.
Yeah, that's fair.
It shows how bad they are. And I was like, no, hold on, I was about to fact check you.
I was trying to use as many appeals to like different fallacies.
Oh,
as I
like
could.
different fallacies.
Yeah. So I used appeal to authority at the end, and then I was the one about them being fact checked was like whatever the one is where you disparage the other side's credibility. Right. And then I
like an ad hominem kind of a thing.
Yeah. And then kind of. And then I tried to do I redefined. I don't know if that is one too, but I like changed the goalposts.
Redefine the premise.
Mm-hmm. And then I also did the thing that Biden does, where he's like, "Come on," or what does he say? Doesn't he say like,
"Yeah, come on, man"?
Yeah, he's like, "Come on, man." Yeah.
You should have said that's a bunch of malarkey. That's what you should have said.
It's like we're gonna end up with so many adorable isms from him over the next 4 years.
Come on, man.
Yeah, it's a funny dude.
All right, should we hop back in? So now we'll flip the script and we'll go Divya and Faraz first. Is that right? Yes. Because Nick was first.
Faraz, did you want to go first, or how do you feel?
You can go. No, I think I've already dropped the mic, so
pick it back up.
Pick it back up. The show's not over.
I didn't realize there was a second part.
Oh, you're gonna have to really make some stuff up.
It's all good.
That's all right.
I know we threw in all the good stuff in the beginning.
That's what everybody else has been doing the whole time. So, all right, ready to go? I'll kick us back in, and I'll start it back with Divya.
Do I just go?
I'll pitch it to you.
All right.
Round 2 of Yep, Nope. We are debating, are web apps and websites fundamentally different? Yep, nope. We're here to find out. Divya, it is now your turn. You have 2 minutes to state a case or refute something that your opponent said. Go ahead.
Thank you for the floor. As Faraz mentioned, I'd like to just build upon his case, which is a lot of the times when we talk about this artificial difference between websites and web applications, we actually mean the same thing, because we're talking about browsers and browser technology and how exactly these assets are viewed by users. And I know Amal had mentioned that the end user experience doesn't matter so much and we should focus on the building of it as a whole, but I think it should account as a whole, because ultimately when you look at websites, and maybe if you want to call it web applications, which is basically a website, ultimately it's about how you build it as well as how it is perceived from an end user's perspective. What I focused on so far is the building of a website and a web app, same thing again. The idea that you can build a fully functional dynamic website using a lot of technologies without you having to artificially call it an application. So this difference between static and dynamic is kind of artificial. If anything, it's a range, as Faraz had mentioned. Websites can range from something incredibly static to something incredibly dynamic, like doing merge conflicts on GitHub, which is possible. And that is something that we should take into consideration. And from a user's perspective, they also don't see that difference as a whole, because in addition to being able to see content directly, they can also interact directly with a website. And to them, it's imperceivable, the difference. And of course, they would not know the terminology and the differences between them, but I think it matters to talk about and to focus on as well. I think the other thing to talk about also is just how websites are served. We often talk about websites as static, where it's on a CDN, and web apps as something that are on servers. And the thing is that artificial difference makes sense when we think of static sites and CDNs as hosting static properties. However, with the movement of edge computing, where we are, CDNs are getting more powerful, you can run a lot of logic at the CDN level. And so websites and web apps, that artificial difference is sort of removed completely, because you can make something incredibly static have logic, like redirects, for instance, where you can route a user from one asset to another. That is
Very good. Okay, Mel, we pitched to you. 2 minutes to respond.
Well, the only thing about that argument that was made that made sense to me was when she said the lines that that web apps and websites, it makes sense for them to be distinguished as differently. So I just wanted to say thanks for agreeing with our argument in one line, Divya.
I think that was taken out of context.
Yeah, whatever. Anyways, so case in point. But
what's
anyway,
the fallacy?
Okay.
It's the whatever.
So I think it's really important for us to start educating users around the scale of the web, especially as users are accessing the web through mobile devices, understanding that a site, a simple kind of a bulletin board for the web is really different than, building complex interactive experience, which, with a lot of read write, a lot of data usage, just potentially just more assets to download up front. Right. And so I think it's important for us to start making the web more accessible in terms of its ability to kind of, I think, have scales and tiers. And I think we all fundamentally agree that, a web app is certainly an evolution of, good old fashioned websites, but they are absolutely not the same, and nor do they take the same level of skill to build, or create or maintain. I think tossing something up on, WordPress as a static site is not the same level of effort as, building a WASM game engine like in the browser. And so you have fundamentally different skills needed to perform the work, and therefore, that alone for me just speaks to why they are fundamentally different things.
Yep, very good. Time's pretty much up, so we'll pass it now to Faraz and give you, Faraz, 1 minute to respond. Go ahead.
So I'd like to remind everyone, the premise that we're debating here is that web apps are fundamentally different than websites. And I'll just focus on the word there, fundamental. The web apps are fundamentally different than websites. What we've heard from the other side is an argument that web apps and websites are kind of different. They've argued that web apps and websites are built a bit differently, that they're an evolution, and that users may perceive a bit of difference in the degree to which a website versus a web app is dynamic, and the degree to which the back button may or may not work. But fundamentally here, the argument is about whether web apps are fundamentally different than websites. And I think if we were debating the difference between websites and native apps, there would be a very fundamental difference there. But since we're talking about an issue of degree here, website can be a little bit more appy or a little bit less appy. I argue that really the difference between websites and web apps is really not that great, and it's certainly not great enough to rise to the level of describing it as fundamentally different. And so for that reason, I urge you to support our side.
Okay, very good. Nick, the final word of this segment. You got 1 minute.
All right. So I'll just respond to both of my opponents real quick, and I'll say that in Divya's argument, she talked about being able to do more at the CDN level, which stands for Content Delivery Network. Content being the key word there. So you're delivering content to consume, and so therefore you're thinking more of websites, whereas web apps would be more. I don't know. I lost my I lost where I was going with that thread. So I'll just
the
go
compute would happen somewhere else, typically
Yes.
a server.
Want a friend? Thanks, Amel. Keep going.
And for us, you were talking about, maybe if we were comparing web apps to native apps, for example. And I would say that with the underlying APIs that you get natively, like battery and geolocation and compass and all of these, and with things like service workers, where can you draw the line between what's a native app and a web app? You can install them just like you would a regular app. It's just the underlying technology that they're built in, but they are applications. And
All
Saved by the
right.
bell.
Saved by the bell there. We've now reached the conclusion of our semi-formal debate. I've been keeping score the entire time, and I'm
You
now
won,
ready to
clearly.
claim the victor.
Oh
And
wait,
the winner of this debate.
How have you been making? Wait, how does this algorithm work? Tell us.
The
it's
winner of this
just-
debate.
He has a web application to do that.
Oh yeah, that would make sense.
And the winner of this debate is me, because the only way to win is by not participating. And I'm the only one
Guilt.
here who did not actually play. So I win. Congratulations to me. After this break, we're going to come back. We're going to peel back the veil. We're going to talk about what our participants actually believe, maybe get into a real world debate around the nuances here, because there's no nuance in that premise, but there's a lot of nuance in this discussion. So we'll return and we will see what everybody really thinks right after this.
I love how Nick just said websites have content and web apps. And I was like,
I realized that I was
They
making
don't
that
have
argument, and I was
content.
trying to step away. And
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Wait, Jared, you need to share this algorithm, dude. You know.
Well, here's the algorithm. I listen to all
Looks
you
like you
guys,
just
and
went
then I
to the
declare
default.
myself the winner. That's the algorithm. It's the simple algorithm. It's just like, while true, Jared wins,
Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So, thank you. I'm getting congratulated in our chat room. Thanks, Aaron. Cheers.
Cheers.
Hey,
Yeah.
Aaron, technically you also won, because the only way you win is by not participating. And you and I both just.
is that how like kid soccer works too?
Oh yeah.
That's kind of different.
Everybody's a
Everybody
winner.
wins. Here, nobody wins except for me and Aaron Yoshitake. So,
This is the downside of being an adult.
yes.
One
the
of
one,
many.
the one thing that is
One
sucks
of
about being an
many.
adult is we
I
don't all get
know.
to win our
I know.
little participation trophies. I mean, I'll send you a trophy if you want it.
I don't want a trophy. I just want orange slices.
That's the other downside of being an adult. You got to buy your own orange slices.
You have to cut them yourself. If you want them sliced, you got to slice them.
Yeah.
I know.
No, but in all fairness, though, I think this is a hard argument to make.
Well, hold on. Let's get
mainly
back into
because
the.
it is
Let's
nuanced.
take
Oh, yeah,
it into the show.
yeah,
Let's take it into the show.
Okay.
All right.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
Marker dropped, and we'll come back in. Okay, so let's talk about what we really think about this. The premise was web apps and websites are fundamentally different, and that's worded in such a way that it is defensible from either side. I think for Ross keyed in on the word fundamental, which I thought was a strong argument myself, even though he still lost at the end of the day. Remember, I was the only one that won, so
Oh.
sorry, but you participated, which was foolish. But what do y'all really think? So do you make distinguishments? Are they different but not fundamentally different? Like, we can just relax and chat. What do y'all really think about this?
I felt like there was the PWA argument was a good one because it is the weird divide. Like, in a way, I think there was two sets of arguments in a way. It was like the websites, web apps. Actually, the part that was like hardly talked about was we talked about it a lot, was like websites and web apps, like the full stack versus like Jamstack, maybe is the term. And then there was the other argument, which was like mobile and web merging, which I thought that one was more nuanced, because the first argument was like, it's very clear that we're moving away from this website web app thing. But I felt like with mobile and this idea of like cross-platform, where it's like React Native, there's I guess NativeScript's still a thing, Ionic, and I guess Flutter is also really exciting for a lot of developers. And that's just like Flutter is unique, and actually everything else is unique except for React Native, because React Native is like building on a framework that developers already know. So if you're building like websites, well, React apps, you would be able to build like something hybrid. And there's a lot of other frameworks like Nuxt and Next, and they do like kind of this idea of like universal apps. But yeah, I thought that was a good argument, honestly. Just saying, even though I still disagree.
I
think go ahead.
I think the focus on how the technologies are, you know, involved in building websites versus web apps is I mean, that's one way of looking at the argument. I was looking at it more from like, what is the user experience like for the end user? And I think that when you tell people about a website, you know, you say, hey, have you seen this app, or have you seen this site? The main like differentiating line that they think about in their mind is like whether it's a website or it's an app. And an app meaning like a native app that they'll search for in like their app store. And so like I've built sites before where people are like searching for it in the app store, and they're like, I can't find your app. And it's like, well, it's because it's a website. It's you know, it's not an app yet. So go to Safari and search for it there, and you'll find it. And so but like from a user perspective, I actually agree with the argument that I was assigned to, you know, the side that I was assigned to. Because like, I don't think users are really thinking about when they go to Safari or whatever browser on their phone, and they're going to some kind of website, they're not really thinking about whether it's an app or it's a website. It's just that they're in the web browser. And, you know, like, I don't know how you distinguish there for the user, because, you know, before we even had like the concept of a web app, like there were like, for example, e-commerce sites that implemented things like shopping carts, where there was like state on the server, and, you know, you're adding things to your cart, and you're adjusting the quantity, and you're checking out, and you're doing all this very stateful stuff. And nowadays an app, a site or an app like that would be built with like more of the sort of web appy technologies, you know, like React or something. And you would very clearly argue, oh, that's obviously an app, because it's using all this client side stuff and all this fancy routing and all this really complicated machinery to do it. But, you know, we had that kind of stuff in the 90s too. And that was definitely, and back in the 90s, I think that would have been called a website for sure, because it was just a website with like a server, like a PHP server on the back end doing some stateful things. So it's all very mixed up. I don't think users really think about the difference. So if we're looking at it from the user perspective, then I think it's really the same.
To add to that, so when I think about a quintessential web app, maybe like the first, at least for me, major web app was Gmail, where it was like, as a informed user, I was like, this seems fundamentally different than other things, but it was still in my browser. And as less informed users, as maybe more mainstream users, I know that, for instance, you know, my parents are on Gmail, and when I talk to them about, you know, their email, it's like, I'll tell them certain things. Well, certain configurations, or I don't know if it's like blacklist or whatever you're going to do, those can only be done via the web, versus inside their mail app that's connected to Gmail. Their differentiation is it in my mail app, or is it on the web? You know, and I'll tell them like, go to the web interface to do that. And to them, there's no differentiation. Like if it's on the web, it's a website thing. And if it's in an app, it's an app thing. So I think that is an anecdotal piece of evidence around the concept that end users are like, is it in a website? Is it in a web browser or not? And that's probably where they think about it. Or is it maybe in the other way around? Is it in an app or not? Which I think PWAs do kind of start to change that calculus a little bit, you know, because if you find it in the app store and you install it onto your phone, and it is a website that's being wrapped and doing fancy things, now is it different than a website? But
yeah, it's interesting to think about it that way, because like a lot of native apps, like I know Facebook has like their own browser thing that they're working on, and it's just like, it's an app kind of, but it's an in-app browser window. And so users are still interacting with the website, so to speak, but they see it in the app shell. And so from that perspective, it seems different.
I feel like maybe instead of developing their own browser or browser extension or whatever, maybe Facebook should just give all of their users like cameras to put in their house. It'll just be easier to like keep track of users, you know? Oh, portal. Yeah, they already did that. So, anyways. All right, I'll stop
Mal
the
is on
Facebook
fire.
shade.
Just
No,
like,
it's fine. It's fine. I'll just, whatever.
It's fine.
User privacy is important, but not to social media companies. So
That was actually going to be one of my arguments for the distinction between the two was a web app is something that you're going to use to do something for you, and a website is going to be something that is spying on you for their benefit. It's a bad argument.
that's a really, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, this is like super nuanced because, I think it's very important that we continue to like distinguish, like blur the lines between, native desktop apps or native mobile apps and, web apps, mainly because, the web is definitely the better platform for users because it's open, but it's also like, it's got to get better. It's got to get better for like small screens. It's got to get better for other, ephemeral interactions that like users.
Oh no.
I lost you, Mel.
Oh, that hurts.
I can launch off that and see if she hops back in. I think it definitely does have to get better. And I think when we think about the difference between the two, I think developers obviously talk and think about these things more often. Fundamentally, are they different? I don't think they're different because for Ross's argument's strong, like the technical ways that they're delivered and executed, like it's all the same technology, it's all the same platform. So they aren't fundamentally different. But what if we change that to it's useful to distinguish? Because I think when we get to the side of somebody who's building one of these things, I think that's where we start to consider them different. Like, what am I building and how am I trying to build it? What's it going to be? Does that change the technologies that I select? Does that change the decisions that I make? And I think at that point, maybe you can say fundamentally, but at least there is a distinguishment that says, I'm building a rich in-browser experience, which is going to be app-like. And I can probably enumerate what app-like means. And therefore, I'm going to pick this technology stack or these particular ways of building it or this architecture in order to make that the best thing it can be, versus what I'm really making over here is a content first publishing website. And so I might reach for different technologies. I think that's where it starts to become more of a useful way of thinking about things. Or do you guys think that even that is not worth distinguishing?
I mean, everybody's building their websites like web apps these days. Even a lot of people are just using the same tools for everything. So, but I agree. I think that is a more useful place to distinguish between the two when you're thinking from a developer's perspective. Like, how should I build this? There's definitely different decisions that you can make there.
I think GitHub's such a fascinating case because it really was a thing that moved from kind of website looking thing to like, actually, there's some pretty rich interactions now, although they've kept they're not a single page app, like they didn't come out and say we are an app, right? It was a place to host your code. And of course, there's tons of stuff that makes that possible, which is very app-like. But the interface was very much like, search for a thing, read a thing, find a thing, right? Comment. These are very basic interactions, but over time, it's gotten more and more rich. And they really have blurred the lines between the two.
Web 2.0. The rise of user interactivity.
Yep.
Honestly, I mean, it's the same with like, if you look at websites that were just like purely one way, where it's like a user didn't really interact. They kind of hyperlinked. It was just like hyperlinks to different things and everything was static. And now a lot of sites are very interactive and like you have things like sockets and WebRTC that allows people to like communicate with each other on a single browser tab like session, which I think is really cool and powerful. And so the line is blurred, definitely. But yeah, I think there's something to be said about from a user's perspective, they might see the difference. Actually, I think a really interesting argument that we can have later, like another yup nope, is websites are dead, long live web apps. Just to like troll this argument further.
There you go.
Write it down.
Write it down. Future premise. Oh, by the way, out there listening, we do take episode requests. So if there's a specific yep, nope premise that you want debated, we are happy to take that up. We're happy to invite on guests and other people to debate these topics, not just us regular panelists. No, Amel, we cannot hear you. I see you in the chat, but I cannot hear you. So to do that, all you have to do is head to changelog.com/request, select JS Party in the dropdown, drop a topic, drop a guest. You can pick your panelists. We know we've had specific panelists requested for specific topics. We're cool with that too. So just a shout out there. If you're listening and you want to hear more debates like this with premises that you come up with, please do drop us a note. We would love to hear from you. Okay, final thoughts before we call it a day. This was a lot of fun. I always enjoy the argumentation, whether or not I agree or disagree. And I always enjoy declaring myself the winner. Nick, you've been quiet recently. Do you have any thoughts on the distinguishments, the usefulness, and what you really believe in this context?
Yeah, I think I think going back to maybe what Frost was saying about how like everything is kind of being built as a web app nowadays. Like that's totally true. My blog that I haven't really posted on since 2015, I just redid with 11D, and it's all JavaScript, but at the end of the day, it's no JavaScript at all running on the page. So it feels like an app that I'm working on, but it's served like a site. And to an end user, I don't think that there's any difference. So I think that's the most important takeaway.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say, like to that point, Nick, like I feel like as people who are people who can write or build web apps, we tend to kind of over-engineer everything. So so I think like there's you don't need React running your blog, for example, right? Or even an NPM dependency toolchain, for example, right? Obviously, like you can do whatever you want. You're an engineer, you can do it. But I think it's important for us to really think about the future of the web, and for me, the future of the web needs to include like more web authors and content creators, and like what does that world like look like? And not just like folks posting content through social media platforms like TikTok, right? Like you see the engagement level there for people who are interested in putting things out there onto the web. But like, I think it would be nice for people to be able to put content onto the open web, without that intermediary. And so, and for that, like we're going to need to kind of, I think, have a more distinct, simpler or more accessible class of tools, and if we really want to get there. And I think for me, that's actually really why I think that the distinguishment between sites and apps can help, I think, define those boundaries for people, on the other side of the spectrum, so.
Maybe if we can quantify the level of over engineering that's going into something, we can distinguish it on a scale between website and web app.
Right. Yeah, maybe we could do it on page size. Like if it's 3 megabytes of JavaScript bundle, then it's a web app, right?
I think
if it's 10 megabytes of images, then it's a website.
There you go.
Totally fair argument, really. Like,
I also think there's something to be said about the terminology. So you know how web developer and software engineer, like people choose whichever to use depending on how they want to be perceived. So for example, I'll just give you my biased opinion, which is whenever I tell people I'm a web developer, it's not as cool as saying I'm a software engineer, because I'm just like, I'm a software engineer holds a lot of gravity. And also in certain countries, you're not allowed to say you're a software engineer without an actual degree. So there's like this distinction, which I imagine is the same with websites and web apps to some extent, where it's not as cool when I say I'm working on a website, but when I say I'm working on a web app, people are like, that's awesome. What are you what are you using? But when it's website, it's like, oh, it's just HTML and CSS, whatever.
Right. It's kind of like demeaning. Let me go on record and say websites are cool. Websites are cool. Come on, people.
What about the term programmer? Do any of you call yourselves programmers?
So I call myself a programmer.
Yeah. A programmer. That's appropriation.
Taking it back.
Yeah, you can steal my culture.
Yeah, that is total appropriation.
So it's funny. I've been around long enough to see the transition, and I know a lot of people actually take offense to certain I've seen blog posts like, do not call me a coder, because they think coder is belittling, but then don't call me a programmer. Like, don't call me a coder, call me a programmer. Don't call me a programmer, call me a developer. Don't call me a developer, call me an engineer. Actually, I'm an architect. I feel like we kind of get caught up on these things. And because each of us does view the world through a different lens. These words have different connotations, or like, to me, it doesn't, I don't think I'm a smaller, or I don't take it as speaking down to me to call me a developer versus an engineer. I couldn't care less, but I can see where for Divya, especially if it has to do with like certain, job opportunities or whatever her context is, like engineer is more uplifting, or she'd rather be called that. So it's weird because we all kind of just have our own ways of defining in our heads what the words mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a really interesting topic for a debate, though. Like like these words. I remember Silicon Valley, that show on HBO. Like I remember getting so distinctly annoyed every time I heard the word coder, because I was like, I do personally feel like coder it belittles like the craft, a little. So I'm
What
not
if coding was the craft?
Yeah, but like I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know. I and this is completely like subjective. So
Right. That's why it's interesting, because we all bring our own
Mm-hmm.
contextual baggage to the words, and then we interpret them according to us. And I used to write for a blog called Fuel Your Coding, and I thought it was totally cool. And then I read somebody else saying that like you that says coding is not cool. And I'm like, well, I thought it was cool when I wrote, but
Yeah.
I think maybe coding attaches to the code monkey term, which is incredibly belittling, right? And that whole like, hey, just go grab a ticket and write the code, or like that makes us seem like we are not all that we are. And so I understand that maybe there's an attachment there, but it's a fascinating linguistics problem.
Yeah.
I think for some reason I just feel like programmer is the most pure term. You like a person who makes programs. It doesn't have the baggage of coder, and it doesn't have the like software engineer feels a little bit grasping to me, like in the same way that the term computer science is also grasping. It's like, oh, we got to add the word science to make it seem like we're legit,
Please respect us.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, computer science?
Science.
Yeah, because you're adding the word science on the end. It's like, oh, the science of
Really?
computers, when really, it could just be called computation or
Computation.
also like
I teach computation.
Well, because
like
it's not about like the physical computer hardware that like we're not like you wouldn't call. I'm trying to think of a good example. You wouldn't call, and it's weird to call an entire field like to name it based on the tool that you use, like the physical tool that you use.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Really what we're doing is like it's more abstract.
Biology and like assays, or whatever, like spectrums.
Exactly. It's not like microscope science.
I think it's the same with like when you see people having degrees, and there are some countries where they call computer science like informatics. And then when you see that, you're like, oh, they're not really a computer scientist. And you're like, they're studying the same thing. Informatics is a study of computational systems. That's literally what computer science is.
Yeah, literally. Yeah, I have to say that there is a sciencey part to comp sci, and I think it starts at the graduate level. But there's a ton of theory, and I don't know if that really for me falls under the computation description.
Interesting.
And so
it's like
maybe
research versus
computational theory could work instead of computer science, but it's definitely there's a lot of theory.
Yeah.
Actually, that's so cool, because I have used that before when I talk about myself. I never talk about myself as a computer scientist because I am not very theory driven. I tend to be very like vocation, like how does it work? How do you implement it driven? And I think I've used this distinction with when I have certain conversations with people, when they talk about like programming languages, and I talk about like the syntax and how exactly it works when you're building a thing and the ergonomics, and then they're coming from isn't it beautiful from a research perspective in terms of how the language is organized? And I'm like, no, but it sucks to work with though.
Well, I think we have stumbled upon a couple of future nope debates around terminology and its usefulness, but quite a ways upstream from where we started today, web apps and websites. That being said, a fun debate, a fun post conversation, and got to give it a shout out to Thomas Eckert in the chat for the best joke of the day, which I missed on when Amel called herself a programmer. It was abropriation.
Appropriation. That's so awesome. Oh my God, our listeners are so smart.
Yes. So you win, Thomas. Thanks
Are
to
you
everyone.
smart or whatever? I'm not going to take it any further. I'm going to
No.
end
Let's
the
leave it with, let's
bro
give him the final
fixes.
word.
Yeah.
So thanks everybody for listening. This is our show for this week, and we'll talk to you next time. And I forgot my music. There it is. Oh, the chill after. The chill beats to vibe to. That's a great picture, Nick. We demand to be taken seriously. The wizards and is that
Arrested Development.
is that from
Arrested
Arrested Development? I was gonna say
Development.
he looks so young there. It has to be
Job. Or what is it?
Job.
Yeah, Job.
One of the best TV characters ever.
Yes.
Like created for sure. Well, this was fun, y'all. Thank you. This
Tons
was
of
like
fun.
a lovely respite.
Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah.
Shout out to
I'm gonna
everybody
add-
in the chat who's been chatting. Igor, M. Chorfa, what's up? Thomas, of course, Mohammed Chorfa. Good to have you listen. If you're listening, if you're watching on YouTube and you're like, what, the chat's disabled, there's no chat. What are they talking about the chat room? We hang out in Changelog's Slack. It's totally free, changelog.com/community. Get a free invite, hop in there. There's a JS Party channel, and that's where all the chatter happens for the show. We just keep it there versus YouTube to keep it all in one place. So if you're wondering where the chat is, there it is. And we will be back next week, same bat time, same bat location. I don't know. I can't remember that saying. It's too old.
Yeah, I
But-
think you did it right.
Okay, cool. I don't have the cool radio voice, but